With so many different watercolour papers on the market, it can be really difficult to know which one to choose. Now, it may be that you like the smooth surface of a hot pressed paper, or perhaps you're like me and prefer the texture of a cold pressed or even mixed media paper that I often use in my tutorials. But what if you could paint watercolour on whatever surface you wanted to? I've been looking into watercolour ground recently, having read a little bit about it online, and I just bought this pot of QOR from Jackson's. It was on sale, so I thought I'd give it a go. I hadn't used it before, and if I'm honest, I was really sceptical as to how the watercolour would perform. But I have to say I was completely blown away, so much so that I felt I had to share this with you and make a tutorial to show you how to paint on top of this amazing surface. If you want to join in, you don't have to use watercolour ground. You can of course paint on your regular watercolour paper, but if you are going to use this, then keep in mind that you do have to let it dry for about 24 hours so that the surface is completely dry before you apply your watercolour paint. So come on, let's do it. So this is the watercolour ground, and straight out of the pot like this, I'm going to apply it onto the tile that I've chosen to paint on. I'm just using a flat brush here, and it requires 2 layers. One layer they recommend that you let dry for about an hour, and then you can go straight in with your second layer. I just applied the watercolour ground as you would a paint, and you can see me just adding a tiny bit of water here to soften any edges that you want to, or tidy any uneven edges up. And on goes the second coat after an hour, and then you have to let it dry overnight. Once it's completely dry, I've traced down my drawing like this. Now I highly recommend that you trace and not draw freehand, because once your pencil lines are on the watercolour ground, you can't erase them. I'm using a low-tack masking tape here. I've printed out my leaf like this, and I've just traced it down this way. We provide you with a line drawing and reference photograph, and I'll tell you later on how you can obtain them. These are the colours: leaf green by Holbein, sap green by Winsor & Newton, olive Winsor & Newton, cerulean green by Winsor & Newton, and mineral violet. Mineral violet's by Holbein, and you can see I've mixed them together there. This is the little palette that I use. This is by Etcher that I bought from Jackson's. Comes in a little pack of 2 like this, and absolutely amazing for mixing lots of different colours. All the materials I'm going to be using will be in the description box underneath this video. So to start with, I have, as always, my little puddle of water in the middle of my palette here, which I use to clean my brush because it doesn't flood the brush with water. And to start with, I'm mixing leaf green by Holbein and sap green by Winsor & Newton. So we have leaf green on its own that I'm applying straight onto the paper here, onto the watercolour ground here, using my number 8. This is a faux squirrel brush. This is a round, and it's by Zen Art. An amazing quality brush, and it's great for bigger surfaces like this. So I'm taking this colour all over the leaf, and this will go on the stalk as well. Now, watercolour is notorious for having that kind of tricky, ugly duckling phase as you work through it, because we're building up the layers as we work through. So if you are new to watercolour, I recommend that you watch this video all the way through so that you can see that tricky process unfold and get past the ugly duckling stage so that you can see how your painting will come to life. Once that first layer of paint is dry, I'm using the second mix of leaf green and sap green together, and I'm applying it in the areas as you can see. If you look at the reference photograph from the side of the screen, you'll notice that there's a highlighted area within the middle of the leaf, so we're painting around that highlight. Our first layer of paint will form that colour. So yes, again, I'm using my number 8 round just to get the base colours on. So I'm using my number 0 brush. This is a round brush, and it's made by Tintoretto. Again, I bought this at Jackson's, and it actually feels more like a liner brush than a round brush, but it's perfect for this kind of painting. So this is the sap green on its own, and I'm adding it to form the beginnings of that darker value at the top of the leaf. We're now just looking at sort of base tones again, so this will form the areas on which we're going to build later on. You can see how I'm using the tip of the brush to apply the colour and then sort of pull that colour into the existing wash. If you've never used watercolour ground before, I would say it feels sort of strange to paint on. It's almost like your brain is telling you it's not supposed to work, but it really, really does. I highly recommend it. It's so much fun to use and the possibilities are endless. You could make Christmas decorations, you can paint on wood, all kinds of surfaces with this, and it could make you use your watercolour in whichever way you want to. The possibilities are endless and so much fun to use. So you can see me now just using the tip of my brush, and I'll continue this process throughout the rest of the leaf. Notice how I've left some of the area untouched here. We wanted to form that little highlight that we can see, and just carrying on building up the layers as you can see me doing here, using my number 0 round. Now, I said at the start of this video that we provide you with a free trace down drawing and reference photograph to accompany this and indeed all of our tutorials here on YouTube. And there are a couple of ways that you can get those. You can join our Facebook group. We are a fantastic community there. You can have access to all of the line drawings and reference photographs. You can post up your finished paintings there and have some feedback from me and our other wonderful members. I'll also put the line drawing and reference photo at the end of this video so you can do a screenshot and print them both out from that way. So stay until the end and you can have them right at the end of this video. Okay, so I'm using a mix here of olive green, sap green and mineral violet to create this kind of dark purpley green tone, and you can see how I'm using this number 0 brush to paint the top of the plant and down the central vein, which will continue down into the stem of the leaf. So just continue grabbing that paint and pulling it down as you can see me doing here. So just working down the stem like this with this number 0 brush. Remember to use whichever paints or materials that you have. So now I'm mixing mineral violet with some cerulean green. This will have a sort of greyish green tone. If you look carefully at the leaf in the photograph here, there is a kind of element of a greyish purpley tone here, and I wanted to put that in because I wanted the leaf to have a sort of natural look. If you are new here, we do launch brand new tutorials every Tuesday. So if that's something that interests you, you may want to click on that subscribe button and the bell notification. That way you'll be notified every time we upload a new video. You may want to also give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. It's a free way of letting YouTube know that you enjoy our content. I just want to take a moment to tell you about our Patreon, which at the time of filming has 4 different membership levels, from mini weekly videos of doodles, vlogs and podcasts to full-length botanical painting tutorials, which are exclusive to Patreon and are of course ad-free. If this is something that interests you, I've put a link in the description below, plus it's a way for you to support my channel. We are also on Instagram at The Wonders of Watercolour, so do take a look. We post pretty much daily. We have a lot of behind the scenes stuff and some fun stuff as well, so do take a look at us there. You can see how I'm using the tip of the brush here to add a little bit of texture to the stem. I'm leaving gaps where we put the original green mix down so that it has a kind of, it has a little bit of texture and it looks a little bit more natural. And I'm also using the tip of the brush to outline the stem at the same time. You'll notice how I'm using this tiny little puddle of water. As I said earlier on, it will help you not flood your brush with water. If I were to clean my brush in the jar, it would really add too much water to the tip of the brush and it would just flood that paint with water. By having this tiny little puddle of paint, it just means that you have the right amount of water on your brush. I'm just adding a little bit of that green tone. This is sap green, and I'm just adding it here to enhance some of the green areas that have now faded. I noticed with this watercolour ground that as the paint dried, it did dry a lot lighter than it would on watercolour paper. So just keep that in mind when you're building up your layers. As with any watercolour painting, it's really important that each layer is dry before you apply the next. So the same goes for working on watercolour ground. Make sure that everything's completely dry before you add any other washes or any other layers at all. So I'm using the tip of my brush here to just add a little bit of texture where we've got the beginnings of that central vein. I've continued the process on the other side and making sure that everything's dry, and now mixing another mixture of this is olive green with the mineral violet, once again working down that central vein. At this point in your painting, when you're adding detail like this, make sure that the paint on your palette has a slightly drier texture. You don't want it to be too dry that you can't pick it up, but you don't want it to be watery. You want it to be thick enough to kind of move on the watercolour ground like this. So you can see the consistency that I have in my palette, and it's really, really important that it's not too watery. Otherwise, you're just going to lose control of your paint. Notice how I'm using the tip of the brush to just add a little bit of detail around the outside edge like that. I've also taken this colour around the outside edges of this side here. At this point, we're just sort of giving the outside edges of this leaf some definition. Just carefully looking at your reference photograph and noticing that there are sort of little serrations around the outside edge, and you can just enhance them by working through with this colour that we've mixed up here. Going around the other side now, and you can see I'm using the same sort of brush strokes by just using the tip of the brush to outline the leaf like this, creating these little bumps and serrations, and also using this opportunity to pull down some of those bumps and lines to create the beginnings of what will be our veins. So just continuing with this process, you'll need a little bit of patience for this. So just using the purple tone and the green tone to start creating these little veins, and I'll do the same on the other side. I'm also adding the little markings that you can see on the leaf here by using the same colour. So this is just the mineral violet with any of the greens. It could be olive or sap, it doesn't really matter. So once I've applied the kind of base tone of the little markings, as you can see, I will start to outline them. So you can see me here using sap green to start some of the veining and also adding a little bit of a block of colour on the outside edge of this element of the leaf and blending it through once again. When you're adding your veining, just keep in mind that the colours of the veins will change as you work through your leaf. Some of the veins will have a stronger green tone at the base, and of course as you hit that central area they may be slightly lighter, so just keep that in mind as you work through your painting. Once the first wash of these little markings are dry, I'm still using the same colour paint on my brush here to outline them to give them a little bit more detail. And just sort of flitting between all the greens on my palette here to start creating these tiny little veins that are on the leaf. As I said, you need a little bit of patience for this, but I think this is the nicest part of the painting. You can start to relax a little bit more and enjoy the process of putting in this lovely fine detail. Just keeping a careful eye on your reference photograph. Remember that the veins may have a little bit of a curve and they're not going straight, and it's important that you put them in the right direction. I've now turned my painting upside down to start to paint the other side like this. I found it a little bit easier because you can see from the reference photograph that they have a kind of, they kind of branch out a little bit. I just found it easier to start the process that way before flicking it back around and picking up that line and continually pulling that line out to the outside edge of the leaf like this. Just using a really light touch and continuing to paint all these little veins in, using a sort of mixture of the different greens that I have on my palette. As I said, just using my discretion as to how I think they are. You have the darker values at the base here and then the kind of lighter tones at the top. So just painting them in one by one and making sure that I keep that kind of curve that's on the leaf, because you don't want the leaf to be flat. And now I'm using the purple and the green mix once again to go over the little areas like this, just painting them in one by one. Just continuing to build them up. Now that everything's dry, you can use this opportunity to really hone in on your detail. So once again, going back to the purple mix with the green, and we can start to outline any areas that we feel need sharpening up. You can see the colours that I'm mixing on the palette here and the consistency of the paint. So once again, I'm sharpening up that central vein and working my way through the painting just to sharpen up any detail that I feel I have lost along the way. You can see me using the purple and green mix to sharpen up those outside edges again, pulling down that vein and creating this really fine detail. Just by creating these little serrations and enhancing them like this, really does make a difference to your painting. You'll need a steady hand to do this and of course a lot of patience. It really does sharpen up that outside edge. And if painting detail is of interest to you, you may also like this tutorial here. I will link it on the top right hand side of your screen so that you can click through and take a look at after you've watched this video. Okay, so at this point it's just a case of sharpening up any of those edges. I'll stop talking and let you watch the rest of this video in peace, but be sure to stay right until the end where I'll put the line drawing and reference photograph for you to screenshot, print out, and you can join in with this tutorial. If you're still here, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.